The moment my mother-in-law looked my 9-year-old son in the eyes and said, "You will never be a Calloway, no matter how long your mother stays married to my son," is the moment I stopped trying to belong to her family and started building a case against her. It was Christmas Eve. The Calloway house smelled like pine and cinnamon, the kind of carefully curated holiday that takes a decorator 3 days to assemble. Liam had been excited for weeks. He had made a card for his grandmother Patricia by hand, cutting snowflakes from white paper and gluing them around a pencil drawing of the whole family. He had included everyone. Even the dog. We were seated at the long dining table when it happened. My husband, Nathan, was in the kitchen helping his father, Gerald, bring out the dishes. His sister, Brooke, was refilling wine glasses. I was talking to one of the aunts when I heard Liam's voice from across the table. He was asking Patricia if she liked the card. She looked at it for exactly 2 seconds. Then she set it face down on the tablecloth and said those words. Quiet enough that only the people nearest her could hear. Quiet enough that no one would have to acknowledge it had happened. That was how Patricia operated. Cruelty delivered in a register just below accountability. Liam did not cry. He was 9 years old and he already knew that crying at this table accomplished nothing. He just pulled the card back toward himself slowly and held it in his lap. I watched his face. I watched him decide to disappear. I stood up. I walked around the table, crouched beside my son's chair, and asked him quietly if he was okay. He nodded the way children do when they are not okay but have learned that saying so changes nothing. I took his hand and helped him to his feet. Then I walked to the doorway of the kitchen where Nathan and Gerald had just emerged with a roasting pan between them. "Nathan," I said, "I need you." His expression shifted when he saw my face. He set the pan down on the counter and came to me. In the hallway, out of earshot of the dining room, I told him exactly what Patricia had said. I said it plainly, without emotion, the way I had trained myself to speak when I was most upset. Nathan went very still. He walked back into the dining room. He stood at the head of the table and he said, "Mom, what did you say to Liam?" Patricia looked up with that particular patience she performed so well. A patience that was really just contempt wearing better clothes. "I was simply being honest," she said. "The boy needs to understand how this family works." That was when Gerald, Nathan's father, a man I had watched stay silent through 3 years of these dinners, looked up from his plate. He looked at Patricia, he looked at Liam, then he looked back down. I went to Liam, took his coat from the rack by the door, and helped him into it. I found my own. I called to Nathan as I buttoned Liam's top button that we were leaving. Nathan was still standing at the head of the table, still processing. Still, the boy who had grown up believing that any reaction to his mother's cruelty was an overreaction. He followed us outside. We sat in the car in the driveway for a minute before I started the engine. The Christmas lights on Patricia's house reflected off the hood in red and green. Liam sat in the back seat with his homemade card in his hands. He asked if he had done something wrong. I told him no. He asked if Grandma Patricia didn't like him. I told him some people don't know how to show love properly, and that it wasn't his fault, and that it had nothing to do with him. He nodded in the way that meant he was filing the answer away but not quite believing it yet. Nathan did not speak until we were on the highway. Then he said, "I'm sorry." I said, "I know." He said, "She's been like this since we got engaged." I said, "I know that too." He said, "I don't know how to make her different." I said, "I'm not asking you to make her different. I'm asking you to stop bringing our son into rooms where she's allowed to treat him like he doesn't belong." We drove the rest of the way home in the kind of silence that isn't empty. It's full of everything that needs to be said next. That night, after Liam was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a folder I had started 8 months earlier. A lawyer had helped me put it together. Her name was Dana Mercer, and she specialized in estate disputes, and I had first called her the previous April when I found a document in a box of Nathan's old tax papers that changed everything I thought I understood about this family. The Calloway Family Trust had been established by Nathan's grandfather Raymond 6 years before his death. Raymond was a quiet man, a retired school principal who had spent his entire life believing that education was the most valuable thing you could give a child. When he died, he left an educational trust worth $380,000, divided equally among his 3 grandchildren. Nathan received his third directly. The remaining 2/3 were held in trust for the minor grandchildren, Brooke's daughter Madison, 9 years old at the time, and Liam, my son, by name. Raymond had included Liam by name. I had found this out from a letter sent by the trust administrator 1 month after Raymond's death, addressed to the guardians of all minor beneficiaries. The letter had been sent to Nathan's address and had been opened, read, and placed in a box where it sat for 22 months before I found it while looking for a copy of our car insurance. Liam's name. Right there in black ink. Raymond had chosen him. I called Dana the next morning. She told me to send her everything. What she found over the following weeks was worse than I had imagined, and exactly as bad as I had feared. Patricia had been appointed temporary trustee of the minor beneficiaries' shares. Within 4 months of Raymond's death, she had amended the trust. The amendment was filed with the original trust administrator, using a procedural loophole that gave the trustee certain modification rights in cases of changed circumstance. The changed circumstance Patricia cited was that one of the named beneficiaries, Liam, was not a blood descendant of Raymond Calloway. Raymond's original trust contained no such requirement. The language about blood descendants was added by Patricia after Raymond was dead and could not object. At the bottom of the amendment, a witness signature. Brooke. I spent a long time looking at that signature. Brooke, who brought Liam birthday cupcakes to school drop-off. Brooke, who had taught him how to make paper airplanes. Brooke, who had signed her name to the erasure of my son's inheritance, and then driven over the following Christmas with a present wrapped in the exact paper she knew he loved. Dana walked me through the trust account statements. Liam's share, approximately $127,000, had been removed from the beneficiary schedule. Madison's share had been marginally increased. The remainder had been moved into a separate account that Patricia managed as family operational funds. Dana told me what that meant. She used the word misappropriation. She told me that given the amounts and the deliberate nature of the amendment, criminal fraud was a real possibility. She asked me how far I wanted to take it. I told her I was a 31-year-old elementary school teacher with a 9-year-old son who had just been told by his step-grandmother that he would never be a real member of this family. I told her I wanted to take it as far as the law allowed. Dana filed a formal notice of dispute with the trust administrator the same week Patricia told Liam he would never be a Calloway. Patricia didn't know yet. She thought Christmas Eve had gone the way Christmas Eve always went. She thought I would smooth things over with Liam by morning, apologize for making a scene, and show up at New Year's brunch with a smile. She had been wrong about me before. She had never been wrong about anything she wanted this badly to be right about. Nathan read the trust documents on the night after Christmas. He sat at our kitchen table with the pages in his hands for a very long time. I watched his face move through stages I recognized from the early days of our relationship. The face he made when something complicated his picture of his family. The careful, neutral expression that meant he was deciding whether to believe what he was seeing. "Did you know?" I asked him. He said he knew there was a trust. He said he knew his grandfather had wanted the grandchildren taken care of. He said his mother had told him the details were being handled. "Did you know Liam was included?" I asked. A long pause. "No," he said. "She never told me that." "She never told me either," I said. 22 months, Nathan. Your grandfather left our son $127,000 for his education, and your mother spent it on herself and never said a single word. Nathan stood up from the table and walked to the window. He stood there long enough that I stopped waiting for him to say something. Finally, I said, "I need you to understand that I am filing a legal petition. I'm doing it with or without you. But I need you to decide which side of this you're on before the process gets further along." He turned around. His jaw was tight in the way it got when he had made a decision and was still getting used to it. "I'm on your side," he said. "And Liam's." I had heard those words before. I had heard them when we got engaged, and his mother made it clear she didn't think I was the right fit for the family. I had heard them when she seated Liam at the children's table at adult family events, when every other child in the room sat with their parents. I had heard them every time Nathan said the right thing, and then, when it actually mattered, stood very still in the middle of the room. But something in his voice was different this time. Something had cracked open. "Okay," I said. 2 days after Christmas, I drove Liam to school, then went to a police station 2 towns over. I filed a report. The officer was professional, took my documentation, and told me the department would review for potential financial crimes. He asked if I had an attorney. I told him I did. He asked if my son was safe. I told him my son was safe from physical harm. The damage that had been done to him was the kind you couldn't see. Dana escalated immediately after I told her about the police report. She filed the petition for trust review and removal of trustee the same week. She also filed a separate motion citing the fraudulent amendment. The trust administrator froze the remaining account pending investigation. Patricia called Nathan at 7 a.m. the day after the filing. He put the call on speaker without telling her. I heard her voice in our kitchen, controlled at first and then less controlled as she realized what had been filed. She told Nathan this was a misunderstanding. She told him I had taken routine paperwork and made it into something it wasn't. She told him that Raymond had told her, privately, that Liam was not meant to be included in the permanent trust because he was not a blood Calloway, and that she had simply honored Raymond's true wishes. Raymond died 2 years ago, Nathan said. He can't confirm that. A pause. Exactly my point, she said. You're going to let your wife drag this family into court over a misunderstanding of what a grieving old man intended. I watched Nathan's face while she talked. I watched him absorb each sentence. I watched him remember every Christmas dinner, every seating arrangement, every birthday card that arrived for Madison and not for Liam, every photograph on Patricia's wall where my son was absent. He said, Liam's name was in the original document, Mom. Grandfather put it there himself, 6 months before he died. You removed it. If that was his intention, why did he have to put it there in the first place? Silence on the line. Nathan continued. I've read every page Dana sent us. I know what the bank statements show. I know what you spent that money on. And I know what you said to Liam on Christmas Eve. Patricia's voice shifted. It became the voice she used when she was building toward something. That particular patience. She said, I said what needed to be said. That boy is not a Calloway. He never will be. I was doing him a kindness by being honest. There it was. 3 years of careful slights and strategic exclusions, and it was still there underneath all of it, as clean and cold as she had always kept it. Nathan said, Goodbye, Mom, and ended the call. He sat down at the kitchen table, and I sat across from him, and neither of us said anything for a while. Then he said, She's been like this my whole life. I said, I know. He said, I kept telling myself it was just how she was, that she meant well underneath it. I said, I know you did. He said, Liam is 9 years old, and she told him he would never belong in our family. I said, yes, she did. He looked at me. His eyes were wet. He said, What do you need from me? I said, I need you to call Brooke. Brooke came over that Saturday. I had texted her first, not Nathan. I said I needed to talk to her privately and I needed her to come without telling Patricia. She arrived, looking like she hadn't slept. She came in without hugging me, which she always did, and she sat down at the kitchen table and pressed her hands flat against the wood. I opened the trust amendment and slid it across the table. I pointed to her signature. She looked at it for a long time. Then she said my mother gave me a stack of papers to sign right after the funeral. She told me they were administrative, that they needed to be filed quickly, that she would explain everything later. I asked if I should read them. She said there wasn't time. I trusted her, I said. Did she ever explain them later? Brooke shook her head. I pulled out the bank statements. I walked her through what Dana had shown me. The amounts, the dates, the account transfers. The trust had been funded at $380,000. The current balance was $14,000. Brooke's daughter Madison had received her school fees paid. Everything else had been consolidated into the operational account Patricia controlled. Brooke's face went through several things I recognized. Disbelief first. Then the specific calculation of someone checking whether they might still be wrong about this. Then something harder and quieter. She said, Emma starts college in 4 years. I said, I know. She said, Mom told me the trust was growing. She sent me statements. She said Madison's share was protected. I told her Dana had reviewed the statements Patricia had sent her. They were summaries Patricia had prepared herself, not official trust documents. The balances shown on those summaries did not match the actual account. Brooke pushed back from the table and walked to the window. She stood there the way Nathan had stood 2 nights before. In this family, that window was where people went to decide things. She turned around. She said, "What do you need?" Dana submitted Brooke's sworn statement 3 weeks into the new year. Brooke described the signing incident, the misleading statements, and 3 years of being told the trust was healthy when it was being systematically emptied. She also provided text messages. Patricia had been careful about financial conversations in writing, but there were enough oblique references to the trust, enough instructions to Brooke to redirect inquiries about Madison's education fund directly to her, to establish a pattern. Gerald called me in February, Nathan's father. The man who had stared at his plate on Christmas Eve when Patricia told a 9-year-old boy he would never belong. He asked if we could meet somewhere Patricia wouldn't see. I told him yes. I met him at a diner 30 minutes outside of town. He was already there when I arrived, sitting with his back to the wall, drinking coffee he wasn't touching. He said, "Raymond told me before he died that he had included Liam. He made me promise to make sure Patricia honored it." I looked at him across the table. He said, "I didn't. He died and she started moving immediately, and I told myself it was complicated, that I didn't understand the legal side, that Patricia knew what she was doing." He paused. "I knew what she was doing. I just couldn't make myself stop her." I said, Why now?" He said, "Because she told that boy he would never be a Calloway, in my house, at Christmas, and I watched her do it, and I sat there." He set down his coffee cup. "I've been sitting there for 30 years. He gave me 2 things before we left the diner. A copy of a letter Raymond had left with a separate attorney to be forwarded in the event of a trust dispute, and a small notebook where Raymond had recorded several conversations with Patricia in the weeks before his death, handwritten, dated, in his careful schoolteacher's cursive. In one entry, dated 6 weeks before he died, he wrote that Patricia had told him Liam should not receive an equal share because he was not biologically connected to the family. Raymond had written underneath, I disagreed. I said, "A child is a child." She did not argue further. "I believe she intends to address this after I am gone. I have taken steps she does not know about." I sat in my car in the diner parking lot for a long time after Gerald left. Raymond had known. He had tried to protect Liam the only way he could from a bed in a hospice facility. He had written it down. He had left a letter. He had put my son's name in a legal document and signed it when he still had the capacity to mean it. And Patricia had waited for him to die, and then erased him. I called Dana on the drive home. She had me pull over before I kept talking. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was not okay, but I was very clear-headed. She told me what I had in my hands changed the nature of the case significantly. She said words like willful, deliberate, criminal intent. She said the police report I had filed in December now had direct supporting evidence from the deceased's own contemporaneous notes. She said, "This is going to trial unless she settles first." I said, "I want it on the record." The formal deposition was scheduled for the first week of March. Patricia arrived with her attorney, a man named Coleman who wore good suits and specialized in family estate matters. He had represented her once before in a dispute with a contractor, and she trusted him with her reputation. Gerald came separately. He did not greet Patricia when he arrived. Dana opened with the trust document, walked through every provision Raymond had included, every beneficiary he had named, every specific intention he had committed to paper. She was methodical and thorough, and she did not raise her voice once. Patricia answered calmly at first. She was protecting the family's interests. She was honoring Raymond's true intentions. She had made necessary administrative corrections. Dana asked her to explain the $127,000 that had been moved out of the minor beneficiaries' accounts. Patricia said trust administration required operational expenses. Dana produced receipts. A kitchen renovation billed to a family property account that had been funded by the trust. A vehicle registered in Patricia's name, purchased 3 months after Raymond's death, paid through the trust's operational account. Travel expenses logged as family administrative costs. Education consulting fees paid to a firm that, when Dana's team investigated, did not exist. Brooke made a sound from her seat at the deposition table. Like she was hearing this for the first time. She was. Dana said, "Mrs. Calloway, Were these expenditures reviewed or approved by a co-trustee or trust administrator? Patricia said she had sole trustee authority. Dana said, "You were appointed temporary trustee, pending appointment of a successor within 12 months. Were you aware that 12 months passed without the successor appointment process being initiated?" Patricia said the process was complex. Dana said, "It is a single form filed with the trust administrator. Did you file it?" Silence. Dana said, "I have a statement from the trust administrator confirming no such form was ever submitted, meaning you remained in a temporary trustee capacity for over 2 years, operating accounts as though you had permanent authority you were never granted." That was when Coleman asked for a recess. During the break, Dana and I stood in the hallway outside the conference room. She was quiet in the focused way that meant things were going well. I texted Nathan. He texted back one word: "Good." When we reconvened, Dana had one more thing. She produced the letter from Raymond's estate attorney, the one Gerald had given me in the diner parking lot, the one Raymond had prepared knowing Patricia might do exactly what she did. She read the relevant passage aloud. "It is my specific intent that Liam be treated as a full and equal beneficiary in all respects. I have been told informally that this intention may be contested after my death on grounds of biological relation. I want it clearly stated for the record that no such requirement exists in my trust, that I added Liam's name with full awareness and deliberate intention, and that any modification removing him from the beneficiary schedule should be considered a violation of my expressed wishes and subject to legal challenge." Raymond had been a schoolteacher for 31 years. He knew how to say exactly what he meant. Patricia's hands on the table were shaking, just slightly. The first sign, Dana said, "Mrs. Calloway, did you read this letter before amending the trust?" Patricia looked at her attorney. Coleman said nothing. Patricia said, "I may have seen something like that." Dana said, "You may have. Or you did. Which is it?" Another pause. Patricia said, "I was interpreting it in the context of..." Dana said, "You removed a child from his grandfather's trust after reading a document that explicitly stated removing him would constitute a violation. Yes or no?" Patricia said nothing. Coleman moved to end the deposition. Dana let him, calmly, and noted for the record that a full response had not been provided. That evening, Nathan and I sat on our porch after Liam went to bed. The March air was still cold enough to see our breath. He handed me a mug of tea and sat beside me on the step. He said, "She knew he wanted Liam protected. She did it anyway." I said, "Yes." He said, "She looked at a letter from her dying father-in-law that said to include my stepson, and she decided her idea of what this family should look like mattered more." I said, "That is exactly what happened." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think I've been making excuses for her my whole life because it was easier than admitting what she actually is." I didn't say anything. "There are moments when the right thing is to let someone arrive somewhere on their own." He said, "What happens next?" I said, "Dana recommends we reject any settlement offer and go to full trial. The evidence is complete. Gerald will testify. Brooke will testify. Raymond's letter comes in as documentary evidence, and the financial records are airtight." He said, "Then that's what we do." The trial date was set for late April. Patricia's attorney filed 2 motions to delay. Both were denied. She made one settlement offer through Coleman 2 weeks before trial. A payment of $40,000 to resolve all claims. Liam's original share had been $127,000. I sent Dana a 1-sentence response. "We will see you in court." The courtroom was small and practical, nothing like what you see on television. The judge was a woman named Prentice, late 50s, reading glasses on a chain. She had a reputation for being unimpressed by attorneys who treated her like she needed things explained slowly. Gerald was in the gallery. Brooke sat 2 rows behind me. Nathan held my hand until we took our seats at the plaintiff's table. Patricia came in last, Coleman at her shoulder. She looked the way she always looked, put together, controlled, a woman who had never in her life been held publicly accountable for anything. She glanced at the gallery. She saw Gerald. Something moved across her face that I had never seen on her before. Fear. Dana's opening statement was 4 minutes long. She laid out the facts in sequence. A grandfather who loved his grandson, biological or not. A trust he created to protect that grandson. A trustee who removed the child after the grandfather could no longer object. Financial records showing the funds were redirected to personal use. A letter from the deceased himself explicitly anticipating this exact action and stating it would constitute a violation. Coleman's opening invoked family complexity, interpretive latitude in estate administration, and the challenges of managing trust funds during periods of grief. He said the word family 11 times. He did not mention Liam once. Dana called Brooke to testify first. Brooke walked to the stand without looking at her mother. She described the signing, the stack of papers, the instruction not to read, the years of reassurances about the trust that were not truthful. Her voice was steady until she mentioned Madison's college fund. Then it went tight for a moment. She recovered. Gerald testified next. He was 71 years old, and he had the careful, deliberate speech of a man choosing every word like it was a legal document. He described Raymond's expressed intentions. He described Raymond's specific conversations with him in the weeks before his death. He described the conversation in which Raymond told him Patricia would try to change things after he was gone, and Raymond's instruction that Gerald ensure she didn't. Coleman asked on cross-examination why Gerald had not acted sooner. Gerald said, "Because I was afraid of my wife." He paused. "I'm not anymore." Dana played the relevant audio last. Raymond had left 3 voice messages on Gerald's phone in the final weeks of his life, each one expressing concern about Liam's status after he was gone, each one stating his intentions clearly. Raymond's voice in that courtroom was quiet and hoarse and absolutely certain. The 3rd message said, "Gerald, I need you to make sure she doesn't do what I think she's going to do. Liam is my grandson. I don't care about blood. I care about what's right. Make sure she knows I said that." The courtroom was completely quiet. Judge Prentice looked at Patricia over the top of her reading glasses for a long moment. Then she made a note. When Patricia took the stand in her own defense, she was composed, polished. She had answers prepared for every question Coleman asked her. She had managed difficult situations her whole life. She was managing this one. Then Dana cross-examined her. Dana asked her, point by point, to walk through every decision she had made as trustee, every account transfer, every expenditure, every form that had not been filed. Dana asked her each question with the same neutral tone, the same slight tilt of her head, the same unhurried patience. Patricia held together until Dana produced Raymond's letter one more time, the one with the explicit statement of intent, the one Patricia had read and then amended the trust anyway. Dana said, "After reading this letter, you removed Liam from the trust because he was not biologically related to your husband's family. Is that correct?" Patricia said, "I was honoring the spirit of..." Dana said, "Mrs. Calloway, is that correct? Yes or no?" Patricia said, "He was not Raymond's blood." Dana said, "Raymond's letter states, in his own words, that he considered blood irrelevant. You disagreed with him." Patricia said, "I knew Raymond better than anyone." Dana said, "Including, apparently, better than Raymond knew himself." Coleman objected. Judge Prentice sustained it, but the words had already settled into the room. In her closing argument, Dana said, "Raymond Calloway was a school principal for 3 decades. He spent his career believing that every child deserves an equal chance. When he created this trust, he included Liam because he believed that. He wrote it down. He said it out loud. He told his own son to make sure it was honored." And Patricia Calloway waited until he was gone, and then removed a 9-year-old child from his grandfather's legacy, spent the money on renovations and a vehicle, and told that same child at a Christmas dinner that he would never be a real member of this family. She paused. The question before this court is not whether family relationships are complicated. They are. The question is whether a trustee is permitted to use a position of legal authority to erase a child her deceased father-in-law specifically chose to protect. She is not. The evidence makes that clear. The remedy is also clear. Judge Prentice delivered her ruling 11 days later. Patricia was removed as trustee immediately. Full restitution of the misappropriated funds, calculated at $134,000 with interest, was ordered against her personally. Legal fees were assigned to the defense. The case was referred to the district attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges related to fraudulent amendment and misappropriation of trust funds. Coleman was already on the phone before the gavel came down. Nathan and I drove home in relative quiet. Liam was at school. He had been at school every day through all of this. He knew something was happening involving lawyers and his step-grandmother and money that was supposed to be his for college. He knew it the way children know things they haven't been told directly. From the weight of adult conversations that stop when they enter a room, from the careful answers to his questions, from the slight change in the air of the house over the past several months. When we picked him up that afternoon, Nathan crouched down in the school parking lot and looked at him at eye level and said, "Good news about the thing we've been working on." Liam said, "Did we win?" Nathan said, "We won." Liam looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "Can we have pizza?" We had pizza. Patricia sold her house in June. The equity covered most of the restitution order. She moved into a smaller place on the other side of the city, alone. Gerald had finalized their separation in May. He was living with his sister, learning what it felt like to have a quiet dinner and not have to calculate every word before he said it. He told Nathan it felt like setting down something very heavy. He told Liam, the one time they spoke on the phone, that he was sorry he hadn't been braver sooner. Liam said, "It's okay. Mom says it's not too late to do the right thing." Gerald repeated that sentence back to me later and his voice broke in the middle of it. Brooke and I met for coffee in July. Real coffee, not a mediation session. Her daughter Madison had been asking questions about why Grandma Patricia wasn't at family events anymore, and Brooke had been answering them with the careful honesty of a parent who has had to accept that her own mother was not the person she believed her to be. She said, "I keep thinking about the Christmas card Liam made, the one with all the snowflakes." She had told me about it in passing during the deposition prep, how she had seen it on the table before Patricia turned it face down. She said, "He put everyone in that drawing, even the dog." I said, "He did." She said, "He wanted to be part of this family so badly." And she took a piece of paper from a 9-year-old and put it face down on the table. We sat with that for a while. Summer moved through the way it does when you have a child in the house. Liam finished 4th grade with a reading award he was extremely proud of. Nathan coached his soccer team on weekends. Gerald came to 2 games, standing at the edge of the field in a hat, clapping when Liam made a good play. At the 2nd game, Liam waved to him from the field. Gerald waved back, something uncomplicated and small and completely undeniable. Liam's educational trust was restored and placed under Dana's recommended independent trustee. The funds would be available for college, graduate school, or any post-secondary program Liam chose. Raymond's original intention, delayed by 2 years and a legal battle, was finally intact. I stood at Liam's bedroom door one evening in August, after he had fallen asleep. The window was open, and the night was warm, and he was sprawled the way children sleep, taking up all the space available to him without apology. The bruise of what Patricia said to him at Christmas had faded. I didn't mean the words themselves. I meant the way he had carried himself through the previous year, quieter than he should have been at 9. Careful in ways that children shouldn't have to be. He was louder now. He argued about bedtime. He had opinions about dinner. He walked into rooms the way children are supposed to walk into rooms, like they have a right to be there. He did have a right. He always had. I thought about Raymond, who spent the last months of his life making sure that was true on paper, who wrote dates in a notebook and left messages on a phone and told a lawyer to keep a letter sealed until someone needed it. A retired school principal who believed every child deserved an equal chance and did everything he could with the time he had left to give that chance to one small boy. I didn't know Raymond well. We had met 4 times before he got sick. He had been quiet and attentive, and he always listened to Liam's stories about school with genuine interest, the way people do when they were once responsible for a building full of children and they haven't forgotten what children sound like when they're not performing for adults. At the last family event before he was hospitalized, Raymond pulled me aside for a moment while Nathan was helping carry chairs. He said, "You're doing a good job with that boy." I said I was trying. He said, "It shows. He's kind. That's hard to teach. It means someone at home is being kind to him." I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought it was a nice thing for a grandfather to say. I didn't know he was already thinking about what was coming, already preparing for a version of events he hoped wouldn't happen and suspected might. He left Liam $127,000 and a clear statement of his own values and a letter addressed to anyone who might need to use it. He left Nathan permission to become the father Liam needed. He left Gerald a reason to finally stop sitting down and start standing up. What he could not leave, and what he somehow helped make possible anyway, was the thing I watched Liam discover over the course of that year. That he belonged. Not because anyone conceded it, not because a judge ordered it, because the people who mattered chose it, and kept choosing it, and meant it in a way that didn't require him to earn it one careful Christmas dinner at a time. The following December, Nathan's family gathered at our house for the first time. A smaller table than the Calloway house, a mismatched set of chairs because we had to borrow 2 from the neighbors, a turkey that Nathan cooked himself and worried about out loud for most of the previous day. Gerald came. Brooke and Richard and Madison came. Marcus, Nathan's college friend who had driven 4 hours just because he wanted to, came. There were no seating arrangements. There was no separate children's table. There was no calculating before you spoke. There was just the warm, noisy, specific chaos of people who had chosen each other, eating around a table that was slightly too small and didn't care. Liam sat next to Gerald and spent most of dinner telling him about a book he was reading about deep-sea fish. Gerald listened to every word. At one point, Liam asked him a question and Gerald answered it, and Liam's face did the thing faces do when someone takes you seriously and it costs you nothing, and that is exactly how it should be. After dinner, doing dishes, Nathan said, "This is what it's supposed to feel like." I said, "Yes." He said, "I didn't know. I didn't have a comparison." I handed him a plate to dry. I said, "You know now." Liam came in to say goodnight before we finished and hugged Nathan around the middle, and then hugged me and said it was the best dinner we had ever had. Then he went upstairs and we heard his feet on the floor above us and the sound of his door. Nathan dried the last dish and set it in the cabinet and turned to me. He said, "Thank you." I said, "For what?" He said, "For not stopping. For not deciding it wasn't worth it." I thought about the letter Raymond had written. The one that sat sealed with an attorney until someone needed it. The one that began with the words, "I believe you are reading this because my wife did what I feared she would do. I am sorry I was not here to stop her myself." I told Nathan, "Raymond started this. I just finished it." He nodded. Outside the kitchen window, the December sky was dark and the neighbors' lights were on, and somewhere down the street someone was playing music. Everything ordinary and quiet and exactly enough. Some families are built from the beginning on the kind of love that doesn't ask you to prove you belong. Some families have to fight their way to it, shedding the people who preferred control to connection, arriving finally at something smaller and truer and entirely their own. We lost people who were never really family. We kept everyone who showed up when it counted. That, in the end, turned out to be the whole point.